What is up, good people of the world? Welcome to Let's Write Music, episode 2. So in the first episode, we wrote a very epic, heroic, full tilt fantasy piece. So we're still going to go fantasy in this episode, but I think we're going to write something that's a bit more subtle. Maybe more woodwind writing, some mallet writing, some interesting harmonies. I'm thinking like a forest, maybe or maybe not a forest at nighttime. Maybe something watery. Something that has like almost like a Zelda temple or something that's ambient but still has some melodic content, but it's maybe not so in your face, but it's a bit more subtle to kind of contrast the first episode. So the first thing that we're going to do, as always, is see if we can come up with some material. So I do want a tune of some sort. I don't want to necessarily go into the tune right out of the bat like we did in the first episode, but I want to go ahead and compose it so I know what it is, so I can sort of work up to it in the structure of it. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Is I'm just going to find a motive, and then we're going to build a tune out of that motive. But first, I'm just going to mess around for a while and see if we can come up with an interesting motive. And when I mess around, I'm probably going to come up with a motive that relates on the extension of a harmony that's underneath it. In other words, I don't want a motive that sticks on for this mysterious quality. I don't want a motive that just stays on the root, the third, and the fifth, but maybe a motive that uses that is on the 9th, the 7th, the 13th, or the 11th. To give it a bit of a dreamy, misty quality. So I'm just going to mess around and we'll see what happens. All right, so after messing around for a little bit, I played a bunch of different random things, kind of, tried different rhythms. And I came across this motive, and it seemed to resonate with me. I think I like it. So it just sounds like this. Right, I like it because it's a little bit leapy, and it kind of is basically just an embellishment of a single tone. Ya-da-da-da-da. But I like the way that it sounds, especially against, in this case, against a chord underneath it. You can see above the C major sonority, right, we have a 6 or 13. You can think of it as 13. Then we have major 7, 6 again. We have a third and then a 6. So it mostly sits on the upper extensions of the chord. It sounds like this. Right, it sounds kind of nice. Ya-da-da-da-da. Right, it has a catchy quality to it, I think, but it has a nice sort of yada da da da. So we'll see if we can do something with it. There are things we could do like I feel like there's a lot of potential. So anyway, so now that we have this motive, I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can spin a full tune out of it, and we'll see how that works. All right, I've built a little phrase out of it, so we'll see what you guys think of this. It's always good to have options, and sometimes when you write a tune and it's finished, and then people listen to it, and it's like I don't know, you listen to, name any good tune, and you can't imagine it being anything other than what it is. It's so inevitable, but sometimes it's good to have different options. And that's one thing that I've learned from John Williams is a lot of the time he'll take a motive and sort of come up with multiple versions of it that both sound similar to each other, but he uses them at different times. For example, the one that I just talked about in the melody video was bum ba bum 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 bum. He has two versions of that. He has that one, and he has dum ba bum ba dum bum 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 bum. And then he has even a third ending that's a little bit more elaborate. Bum ba bum 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 ba da da dum. Right. So he comes up with so it doesn't necessarily. It's not like you're repeating the tune the exact same way every time, and I think it's good to have options depending on depending upon what comes after it. I'll give you one more example: is Rey's theme from the new Star Wars, right? So after he has the da da dee da da do do da da do do, he either goes to la da 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 da, or he goes to ya da do do do. So they're both continuations to the tune, and they're both options. So that's what we have here. Long story short. So I'll go ahead and play this tune for you with the first option, which is built directly out of the motive, and then the second option sort of gives us relief from the motive. And I'll probably use them both in the piece, but we'll see. So that's the first one, and again, that F sharp is sitting sort of on the 9th of E minor, and then the second option is this which is a bit, again, gives us relief from the motive. It's a bit more conclusive. Right, and I might even be able to use this second phrase as like the answer to the first phrase, right? And then the big orchestra comes in. Woodwind runs counterlines. In fact, that's probably what I'll do. I'll use this as the secondary phrase. Now, it is a bit repetitive to have the second phrase be so similar to the first one, but I think we could make up for that in what we do around it orchestrally. You know, we can repeat it with variation, right? Because that's another thing. You know, I know you guys have all probably heard Yoda's theme a billion times, but check out Yoda's theme because it is literally the same. He repeats the same tune like 5 times in the track, verbatim, and he just changes the orchestration every time, and it keeps it fresh. So it's a great way to get a tune stuck in your listener's head. But we're definitely gonna save this for the climax of the piece. We're gonna hint at it ahead of time, but we're not really gonna give away. We're gonna save so it doesn't get repetitive or boring. We're gonna save it for the climax. Okay, so now that we kind of have a big tune, I'm gonna probably come up with a couple of other smaller motives, maybe some harmonic progressions, and we'll mess around with those and see what we can come up with. And then once we have maybe 3 or 4 ideas, we'll start figuring out how we're gonna structure it into a piece. So I noodled around a little bit and came up with some harmonic ideas, some part writing ideas, a little bit of 2-part counterpoint. I think we have enough material to get started on the piece, but before we do that, I'll just sort of show you what I came up with. I put the harmonies on top, just to let you know what they are, so you don't have to like analyze it. But I will say that the way that I compose, or the way that I harmonize when I'm trying to create interesting harmonies, dreamy harmonies, advanced extended techniques, things like that, it's very voice leading driven, and it's very much centered around the concept of harmonic relativity. So just looking at these chords up top, in other words, what makes this progression work is not necessarily the fact that it's an A major 7, a C major 7, B major 7, G major 7. It's not like just those chords, but it's the way that they're voice led and the voicing, where the notes are placed, how the melody relates to the harmonies underneath. I'm gonna go ahead and play it for you. Yeah, so I messed around for a long while, and I came across this, which I really liked. I feel like it's going to be in a sort of, I don't want to say dynamically climactic, but emotionally climactic moment in the piece. Maybe we'll have some low, rich stuff, and suddenly it just all clears, and you just hear this in the air. Maybe in like sul ponticello strings, like, you know, just something really icy and really cold. But the way that I compose this is through an intervallic chord progression, which is something I'm going to talk about in my harmonic relativity series in a video very soon. So if you're watching this video, it might already be out. But in any case, just to give you a basic idea for the purposes of this video, it's where you take the melody that you have, and rather than placing it at a key and tonally using chords that are diatonic or that have a tonal function, you are just creating vertical sonorities of a certain consistency, and then you're sort of planing them around, right? So planing, again, to reiterate, is where you just take chords and sort of move them around. So this is harmonic planing in the sense that the melody is always related. The melody is always the tonic of the chord, and I really especially wanted it to sound like a minor 6th sonority. So like right here, for example, you know, this, even though it is technically an A major 7 and you would write it as an A major 7, it really is a C sharp minor with an add 6, you know, add natural 6. So you get this really nice, you know, this you get this really nice minor second or minor ninth if it's voiced open dissonance, and that specifically was what I was trying to create. So you'll notice that pretty much all of these chords, almost all of these chords, are based on that sonority. So like the A, you know, if we sort of rethink these as, you know, like a C sharp minor 6, the A is the minor 6, and with, you know, if we rethink of this as an E minor 6, the C in the melody is the minor 6. So the melody always relates to the chord in the exact same way. So we're basically just looking at the melody and then building chords underneath based upon a certain sonority. And in this case, I wanted to go for the minor 6 because it has a cold, sharply brittle, dreamy sound. And then, of course, once you set up a pattern like that and it sounds consistent harmonically, you know, then you can change the pattern. So like, you know, right here, or not right here, but this G6, for example, we expect this to sort of go to an E flat minor or a D sharp minor, right? Because the B would be a minor 6. So if we kept the pattern up, we would expect this to be that chord. But the fact that we made it G6 and just sort of continued what the previous sonority was gives a sense of like, oh, wait a second, you know, it's the same chord. Are we waiting for something? And then we get this B flat major 7. Which is indeed what we want. So, you know, set up a pattern, then violate it. But and voice leading is another really important thing. You'll notice how even though the harmony is planing in a certain sense, the lower voices are it's voiced in such a way that there's as much contrary motion as possible. So it's not like Debussy where you have big chunks of sonorities that are just sort of moving around in the piano the same, but it's a more fluid thing and it sounds less like planing. That's why I don't necessarily call it planar harmony and rather intervallic harmony, because it's more as a result of voice leading. So I'll just play that one time again. And just to let you know, these are sort of interlocking sonorities. In other words, you know, for a nice panning effect, put first violins on left and second violins on right. I interlock the voices, you know, so it's sort of like this, so that it has a more balanced sound. And it's sort of going between closed voicing and open voicing. But I'll go ahead and play that one more time. Right, and if you really look at this closely, if any of you decide to, like, you know, analyze it, you'll see that sometimes I switched the voicing around and did some voice crossing in order to make the voice leading better, right? Because I really tried to make each individual voice as melodic as possible, you know, even though it's all weird. You know, we have a... Right, so we have, and I should probably hold that common tone over, right? Or like... And even so, like right here, we have 3 leaps in a row, but together it spells out a consonant chord. Even if that chord isn't perceived vertically, it is perceived linearly, right? Right, and when we have leaps, you know, we move down by step, move up, and then come back down to the note we were on, and then leap, and then resolve by step. You still want to try to make the voice leading as smooth as possible. You don't just want to, you know, just sort of block chords around. That doesn't sound very good with string instruments. But anyway, I don't want to get into the harmony of that too much because I'll reserve that for other videos. This is mainly about orchestration. But let me know if you have any questions about that progression. This right here is straight up Studio Ghibli. This is like chordal harmony with some added tones. So I'll go ahead and play that. Right, and I come with this little bass line. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. So I'll probably play around with that a little bit more, and I feel like this sonority right here, boom, 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 and then it can be played with a different set of instruments and a different key. Boom, 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 and sort of have a dialogue between this idea and the other idea. But yeah, these are just pretty simple major 7 add 13 chords, right? And I think the thing that makes it sound interesting is the fact that this A major and the G minor, A flat major and G minor are from the same key. In the sense we feel like we're in C minor and A flat is the 6th chord, and then G minor is sort of the minor 5 chord. So that sounds normal. But then when we move to F sharp minor, even though it makes sense in terms of building the chords from the melody downward, from a tonal perspective, F sharp minor feels like a modulation. So in a certain sense, we're just continuing the pattern, but also because our ears are just so used to listening to tonal diatonic classical music, it sounds like a modulation. So again, when you create these weird harmonic progressions, there needs to be some mode of thinking or axis on which there's commonality, and then another mode or axis on which things are changing all the time. You can't have things change all the time, because it just sounds disjunct and incoherent, and emotionally it doesn't say anything, so to speak. And if it's too consistent, then it can get very, very dull very quickly. So kind of combining those things together, I think, is what makes effective harmony. And then over here is just some simple 2-part counterpoint. I orchestrated it out a little bit. I just doubled it with some clarinets, but I'll probably do some more things with it. But yeah, so it's basically just some contrary motion. I really like contrary motion, with a simple descending chromatic bass line, with some harmonic implication. I kind of wrote up here what I kind of hear the harmony to be implied as, if I were to add more harmony later. But, you can be the judge of whether or not you interpret these 2 lines as that. Right, so I think that'll be a cool little moment. And again, right there, we might add some sul ponticello strings. I think that'll make a nice sense of, tension and introspection, or not introspection, but what's the word? If I think of it, I'll tell you. But so yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking for that. I'm at the point now. Usually when I sketch things like this, I don't necessarily like sketch out the whole piece or come up with tons of ideas, but we're just getting ideas flowing. I'm just sort of messing around, and I'm at the point now where once you get to the point where you start orchestrating things in your head, that's when you should start writing the music. But I don't necessarily like to sketch the piece and then orchestrate afterwards. Just because then you're not really writing for the instruments. I like to write specifically for the registers and the timbres and the combinations of instruments. Yeah. So, and again, I think that the fact that it's just sort of a naked 2-part counterpoint, and then the full chord comes in later, and it's the contrast between those 2 things is nice. And then right here, and just to let you know, the only exception to these chords is that we have a little Lydian 4/5 suspension, another Lydian 4/5 suspension over here. We have a 9/8 suspension down here. I shouldn't say suspension because it's technically not a suspension. It's really just a neighbor tone. But because the suspension, that's one thing. I don't want to get on a rant about this, but in the pop and jazz world, suspended or a sus chord, right, is just a chord that has, a note that wants to be resolved. So like G, C, and D is a G sus4 chord, which resolves downward. But in the classical sense of the word, suspension, technically in counterpoint and part writing, actually means that the note has to be prepared. In other words, this A, G, that's a 9/8 suspension, it wouldn't be considered a suspension if it was like, because it's not prepared. But in order for it to be considered a suspension in the classical sense, the note has to be carried over from the previous chord, right? So we have like an F major chord, and the A exists in that chord, and then we change the chord, the A stays, and it's suspended, so to speak, and then it resolves, right? So, hope that makes sense. So, technically it's not a suspension, but who really cares? Anyway, yeah, that's it. So, in the next episode, we will begin orchestrating. Should be fun.